Hello and welcome to the Pause It podcast. I'm Dr. Sam and with me is Dr. Robert. How are you doing today?
Hey, Dr. Sam, how you doing?
I am doing really, really well. Today was the kids' last day of school, so it is summer vacation.
Ooh, that is, I feel like that's just a lot coming up. I feel like every time we had summer vacation, there's like trips planned, there was like tournaments for sports. I feel like this life gets crazy
It does.
for parents.
Yeah. And like when I was younger, I feel like I went to summer camp, the same one all summer.
Mm.
And now it's like, oh, this week we're doing this one, and this week we're doing this one, and then we have a half day here, and then we have one thing here, and then it's like, we're doing this thing, and we have tutoring, and we have, it's like, so like I literally have like a board of just like, okay, it looks like a mind meld. Like this one's doing this one's doing that. I have 3 kids, so it's like they're all doing different things.
I don't know how
But
you do it with 3 kids, man. Like, I feel like there's so many different schedules you have to combine then because they're
um
all kind of close in age too. They're not like,
yeah.
I mean, no far apart, but not
No, they
bad.
are. I mean, the really like it's 9, 7, and 4.5. Like they're
Yeah,
pretty close together. So I would not be able to do it without my husband because he's the best.
Paul is the coolest guy. No, I aim to be Paul one day.
Yeah.
That's the goal. So,
He really is. Like I honestly don't he just does so much and he's so helpful. So I don't know. He's the best. So and my
it's a
kids are
good,
good.
it's a good
They
team.
make it easier. That
It's a
thanks.
good team effort. So,
Yeah.
takes two to tango.
Yeah, no,
So,
it's like it's always like there's always one of us like kind of taking point with one thing or the other, so just kind of communicating and making sure that like, okay, you're going here today, I'm going here, and okay. So, but yeah, it works out pretty well. We have fun.
well, good. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah.
So, well, this week, I think we have some exciting stuff to talk about. I think
Yeah.
after last week's conversation, I guess it was a couple weeks ago when we made that podcast, but we talked a lot about tick preventatives, but
Hmm.
I don't think we actually talked a lot about ticks themselves, which can be something that's gross for most people to think about just in general
Yeah.
because they're not appealing. And every time you hear about it, it's because you're in the woods somewhere and you come down, from a run or something like that, and you got one on your leg and you freak out. So I
Ugh.
think it's a good
And
place to start for
I
today.
hate them. I'm gonna say right now, I think ticks are like hardly anything grosses me out. Ticks
Yeah.
are so gross to me. I think they're awful, awful, awful,
More than
awful.
more than maggots and fleas.
I would take maggots any day and
Really?
twice on Sunday.
You
Yes,
like wounds though, because you're weird,
I
so
do.
that doesn't
I love
count.
wounds, and maggots can be helpful in healing wounds. They can come in there and just do their little job, and they can be cleaned out. And they are not all the time something you have to worry about. Maggots, I'll take any day. Ticks, I just like I see one and I'm like, oh, they're everywhere. So
That's well,
plus
good enough.
plus here's the thing. Maggots are helpful. Maybe okay, not all maggots, right? I mean medical maggots are helpful, but
Yeah, I was like,
but not all maggots. But the thing is I mean like the amount of diseases that are transmitted by ticks is just and they're bad diseases. Like potentially
yeah.
fatal diseases. They're horrible.
Yeah, I think because everybody knows for human medicine, like Lyme disease is probably the big
Yeah.
one that most people can think of for
Oh yeah.
there's a lot of other diseases that Lyme's or that ticks can not only transmit to humans, but to our pets as well. I think that's why this conversation is
Oh
an
yeah.
important one because we talked about like allergies and all that kind of stuff in preventatives last week, but we don't talk
Mhm.
about why it's important
Yeah,
to
we kind of just
take them
threw out
out.
like, okay, just keep them on flea and tick preventative. It's like we were
Yeah,
focusing on the flea part of it, not so much the tick part. And
yeah.
I don't know. I grew up on the East Coast. Lyme was everywhere, everywhere. My brother had Lyme disease. It's terrible. Lyme is
Oh,
horrible,
really?
horrible for pets.
That's
Yeah, he did.
oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he sure did.
Oh,
And I mean, it's just like there are certain areas on Long Island and in Connecticut and stuff like where it's rampant. It's everywhere. And I think the important thing to know is it's moving. That's the thing. I mean, there are specific types of ticks that transmit specific diseases, right? And there are certain
mhm.
ones that can transmit like more than one type can transmit the same disease, right? So
Yep.
it's not always like only well, I actually think only the Exodes I think is the only one that does Lyme actually.
Yeah.
Um
But there's
but
a couple that do have multiple diseases they can
right,
transmit at the
exactly.
same
Yeah,
time, which is
exactly. But there didn't used to be, I think, as much Lyme disease, here in Indiana. I don't really think it was like a big thing that people worried about very much. We
mm,
see a ton of Lyme now. And Part of it might be that we're doing a lot more testing for it. Honestly, it's become part of like
Yeah.
yearly we're checking what's called a 4DX test, which means like we're looking for four different things when we're testing it. And that's
Mhm.
heartworm disease, Lyme disease, Ehrlichia, and anaplasma. Ehrlichia and anaplasma are two of those other
Tick-borne diseases.
tick-borne diseases that we do see. Um, and so yeah, I think there is a little bit of that bias of like, yeah, okay, we're checking for it more. So maybe we're finding it more.
But it's good to be
Um,
aware that it's out there because, like you said, there is some geographical component to it, and, I actually did my first externship in veterinary medicine out Old Lyme, Connecticut. That showed me that I want to be a veterinarian. That's where the epicenter of, or, like, where the origination of
oh
Lyme
yeah,
disease came from. So, I
yeah.
remember going for a run one time, and the veterinarians I was staying with, they're like, "Don't worry if you get a tick on you, just make sure it's not on you for more than a certain amount of time, because otherwise, it won't give you the disease as long as you're taking it off too quickly." So I was, like, now freaked out. I was like, "Ugh, horrible." But,
Well, there is some
yeah.
truth to that though, right? I mean,
Mhm.
like I think there's maybe like a couple of things that we should mention about ticks just in general. Like
Yeah.
when they have to take a blood meal, right? So they have to actually attach.
Yep.
They don't bury at their head. That's a like myth. They have a mouthpiece that
Yes.
goes in almost like a straw. But there is no head that gets left behind. Like when you take a tick away, people are always like, they left their head. I'm like, that's not a thing. That didn't happen. um, it
Sorry.
can look like it, you can look like there's that little piece left, right? But it's not like the
Yeah.
actual head is digging in and buried in. It's just a little mouthpiece. But it causes the saliva causes usually an inflammatory reaction. So that's why it
Mhm.
looks like there's a big bump there.
Yeah.
In almost all cases, right? Have you
Yeah.
ever noticed that?
Yeah. And most
Um,
time when by the time we see them, most time it's after the tick has been there, and we're seeing the resultant
yeah.
disease that comes from it afterwards. But in this case, I mean, we'll see a lot of dogs in Mexico, and they'll have just ticks all over them, and they're big and plump, and they're just full of their most recent meal, which is
Oh,
unfortunate
I
for the pet.
I take ticks off of dogs all the time.
Oh, do you too? Even up there?
All the time.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's horrifying. Sorry.
yeah,
I mean, I
it is.
expect it from, strays from Mexico, but I guess I haven't seen, yeah, I didn't think about it from your area. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
all the time.
horrifying.
And because a lot of time and like at weird times of year, because people think like, oh, it's the fall, I can stop my preventative. Oh, it's the middle of winter. There are no ticks. Not true, because they can actually survive through the winter. And we can see tick-borne diseases all year round. So
Yeah.
stay on your preventatives all year round.
Yeah.
But no, I pull them off all the time because people are like, "Oh, it's March. I didn't restart my med. I really didn't restart their flea and tick preventative. For." And I'm like, "Well, here's a tick." And then there's also people who are afraid to remove them. Um,
That's probably one of the most common phone calls we get. It's like, "Oh, I found a tick. What do I do?" And then, "Can we come in to get it taken off?" And that's pretty common.
yeah, yeah. And I think it's important to know that like you can take a tick off at home. There's a
Mhm.
few rules of thumb about it. Don't try to smother it. Definitely don't
Yeah.
do that. Definitely don't light it on fire. I've heard that one before. Don't
Yeah.
Do not do that. You will burn your dog. Um, and don't squeeze its body because that will
Yeah.
release the blood back into, the saliva, the blood back into the
Yeah.
dog or the cat. So actually you do want to take at the base of the tick itself and pull up. So either with at work we would use hemostats, at
Yeah.
home you could use tweezers. They do
Mhm.
have these nifty little spoons that will like go
Really?
like underneath the tick and
Oh.
then you can just pull them straight up.
Oh,
Man,
good to
that's
know.
a good giveaway we should give at a conference one time. That would be a good one.
That's actually good because that's a thing that people talk about all the time, so it's not a
Yeah.
bad idea.
Yeah, we should give those out because that is I mean, they're not fun to have to take off and all that, but yeah, you just kinda get that thing off, and that is the thing, get it off as fast as you can, because exactly
Mm,
what you said, Robert, is so key. The longer they stay on you, the
mhm.
more likely they are to transmit disease.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is true for Lyme disease, but I remember because I had a tick on me back when I was in old Lyme, and the gentleman had said that as long as they're not on you for more than 24 hours, you're okay. Now, I don't know
I
if
think it's like
there's
I thought it was like 8 hours.
so that's I don't know, is it different for certain diseases? So that's one
It is.
thing yep.
It
Okay, so
is.
there it is. So maybe it's different
Mhm.
for certain diseases 'cause,
Yeah.
so I'll maybe follow up and find out how long it is for each disease, if we can find that information, if it's even
Yeah.
available.
Well, I was
But,
starting to look because when we were talking about, having this conversation, I was like, well, let me
mm,
let me see just like on a quick reference. And I think because it's so varied, it's not we'd have to actually, yeah, look up each specific one
yeah,
and see. And I don't know that it's even 100% like, "Oh, anaplasma starts at X time," you
Yeah.
know? I think they know pretty well because so much more has been done with Lyme that I think
Yeah.
that there's a pretty good idea that if you use one of the, like, products, like the oral products, like, NexGard, Simparica, Cordilio, I think is the other one. Um,
Yeah.
if you use any of those, that it will kill the tick most of the time before the tick
Disease has
can
been
actually
transmitted.
transmit disease. The tick has to take a blood meal in order to die, right? It has to actually get the medication. It has to, get in, process it, and
Yeah.
die. Um, but it will be dead or dying before it can transmit the disease, at least for Lyme. I think where there comes to be some variability is that on average, those medications usually start to work around 4 hours, but can be any as soon as 2 to 12 hours, right? So there's a range at
Yeah,
how
that's a big
how
range.
long those to take because there's biology involved, right? I mean, but
Yeah.
it's not nothing's 100%.
Yeah, metabolism plays a role, genetics, there's so many components that play a role in that, so,
Right.
um, that
Yeah.
explains the differentiation of the 2, but it's an important thing to keep in mind, and that's why you shouldn't just give your dog its first preventive when you're about to go on a hike, because maybe not the best time for it, maybe give it the day before, or maybe the week before, so at least start it, or just give it
Right.
consistently as
Yeah.
instructed, so,
No, it's very true. And also understand that, they're really good preventatives, but the best thing that you can do is also do a tick search after you come back from one of those things and if you can find
mm,
them. Now they can be as like the end of a pencil. I mean, they can be tiny. The little nymphs can be
yeah,
really, really small. But try to do your best, to wipe them down after
mm,
a place like that. And you kind of know those places, right? Like there are some places that are notorious. Like you're just gonna be covered in ticks when you come back. So make sure that you're being extra careful.
yeah, no, I've gone hiking with Loki a lot in some of the woods out here in California, and, like, I'll come back and there's, like, they haven't attached, but there's, like, 8 to 10 ticks on him. He's on preventatives. I even put a spray on him too that helps with it. The sprays actually helped quite a bit. But in general, there's about 8 to 10 ticks on him afterwards that I have to, like, make sure I get off of him because 'cause I'm not sure if they'll attach or not, but I'm not gonna play that game, so I'm gonna make sure they're off of him
No,
and
you don't want to find
avoid it.
out at all after the
So,
fact. Yeah, and it's
yeah.
always one of those things too where, I mean, also nobody's perfect, right? So you
Mm,
can miss a month or something like that, which is why a lot of times when we're saying like every year you should test to see, do the 40x test every year.
mhm,
So people are like, well, they're on prevention every month. It's like, okay, but and the preventions are really good, but there can be failure prevention. So let's go ahead and let's test and make sure that we
yeah,
know. Because then we know the things to screen for, we know the things to watch for. And depending on, I think the ones that we test most commonly, we kind of know those things to watch for. But I've definitely
mm.
seen, and I'm sure you've seen clinical cases of Lyme disease. I've definitely seen
Actually,
clinical
not
cases.
lime as much. We don't get as much lime out here.
Really?
We get a lot of Ehrlichia and Anaplasma.
Hmm.
Those are probably the number 1 and number 2, probably most common ones just because of our proximity to things, but,
Oh, wow.
back
So,
in back in Chicago, I got a little more lime, I think.
oh, okay. Have you seen a clinical case of Ehrlichia or Anaplasma?
Oh, not recently. Sorry, you said Ehrlichia or Anaplasma or lime? Sorry.
Ehrlichia, you said you see more of those. So I was curious if
Yes,
if you've
those
seen.
are we see, like, weekly because we get all the IMA or certain diseases that are caused by them. We
Well,
see
we
them.
talked about them. We in another podcast, we talked about
We
immune-mediated
did.
hemolytic anemia,
Exactly.
and that is one. You're right. So when we see those immune-mediated diseases, one of the very first things I do is do a tick panel, check and
Yep.
see is this tick-borne. Because if I can get this dog on treatment for the bacteria, well, then great. We're gonna have a much better time here.
Oh, yeah. 100%. That's probably the most common thing we see, like, our internal medicine department is full of those cases. I see it probably 3 to 7 a week.
Oh my
There's
gosh.
so many.
So when you see those, the immune-mediated ones, do they do better then once because I've never actually all of my immune-mediated hemolytic anemias, thrombocytopenias, any of those, none of them have ended up being, tick-borne. Now mycoplasma, that one cat, remember I told you? That one
Yeah.
cat, and he's doing great, by the way. Um, but, I've never had a tick-borne one. So does it actually change the course of disease?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is you have to, like, fix the underlying issue because it's, like, a secondary cause. Once you
Right.
fix it with the doxycycline,
Mhm.
then yeah, it makes it a lot easier to treat, and then a lot of times those are the ones that do not relapse afterwards
Nice.
because, at least not for that reason,
Right.
um, as long
Yeah.
as I stay on preventative again, but, those ones actually do really well typically,
Yeah.
as long as you allowing for financial situations of the owner, that's always a big part of it, but assuming the finances aren't an issue, because a lot of times you have the transfusions that allow you to give the time for the steroids to work and the antibiotics and so forth, then yes, they typically
Do
can
you
do pretty
find that
well.
the steroids and stuff work faster, that they kinda get back to a normal place where you can start weaning them faster, or do you not really find that?
You know what? I tend to speak to an internist about because a lot of times I help diagnose them and get them on the right track,
And
and
then you're
then
like,
they well,
"Bye."
yeah, that's the advantage of ER. I get to,
Yeah.
diagnose them, get them started, stabilize, and then see you on to your way. So, I'll
Yeah,
have
and
one
then
of
you
my
send
interning
them
friends
back
on.
to me. And then I'm
Exactly,
like
then I'm like, "Good luck, guys." So, what about
but
you?
that's
Anything in your experience where you've seen them, like, improve? Uh,
well, like I said, I mean, I think almost every single one of my cases like that have always been, like the idiopathic ones, like we can't find something to fix. Now, I have had some that have been because of cancer. That's a
okay,
different story. But I've
yeah.
not ever had them be tick-borne. But I have had a clinical case of Ehrlichia that was a I mean, I never thought that that's what it would be when this dog came in with, the anterior chamber of the eye, so the front part of the eye was just
Oh,
filled with blood, hyphema, and I was like, uh-oh, that's not great. We better figure out why, because usually the
yeah,
eyeballs are the window to whatever's happening in the rest of the body. So I said, okay, well, we got to figure out the why if we can. 50% of the time when they have that kind of thing, you can't find it out, but if you can, you should try.
yeah,
And sure as anything, that dog was having a syndrome that can happen secondary to Ehrlichia called hyperviscosity syndrome. And that was what was causing that. And so we worked it up, and I was like, oh, this is clinical Ehrlichia. And the thing that's hard about Ehrlichia is that it's one of those ones that this dog had tested positive 2 years before and was asymptomatic,
mhm,
and we never had any reason to know that there was a problem. The
mhm,
only indication that I've learned since having this case is that there was mild increase in globulins on a blood work maybe 6
okay.
months before
Oh,
that,
okay,
you
interesting.
know, there's other things that can cause that, right? Inflammation. It can just be like a indication of inflammation in the body. So it's not like you'd go chasing that down if everything's normal. But in a dog is Ehrlichia positive, you may start really watching that or even consider treating
Okay,
when you start to see it's kind of like with dogs, and this is one of those other things that we start to watch for if you have a dog that is positive for Lyme, let's say.
yeah,
Well, you start watching to see, are they having protein in their urine? There's things that you can start screening them for because that happens. Well,
yeah.
now we could potentially have a really, really serious problem.
Yeah, it's some of those diseases are just difficult to manage in the first place. There's and actually, do you ever do you only do a 4DX when you're testing for it, or do you do a tick PCR as well?
We don't. It's very so the
Oh,
40X is really actually very sensitive.
okay.
And I know, see, this is one of those diseases where if you ask about they do it every year. I think they ask a panel of like 10 internists how you
Uh,
should deal with Lyme, and you get literally like six different answers. Like,
Yep.
should you give prophylactic antibiotics? Should you do a quant C6 on everything? Should you, what do you do? How do do you
Yeah.
ignore it and wait for them to be symptomatic? So, I mean, I think it's one of those things where you have to have a conversation with the owner, let them know what the potential risks are, which with Lyme, the things I usually tell them are Lyme arthritis and Lyme nephritis, which is a really potentially serious kidney disease secondary to the
Yeah.
Lyme. And I found that it's the Lyme nephritis is the scariest one because I feel like they don't do well once that happens.
Yeah, I would agree. Those ones, I honestly haven't seen many of those cases, to be completely honest with you, because we
I've
don't see as
seen
much Lyme.
two, and they neither of them went well.
Really? Yikes.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah,
unfortunate because yeah, it's just been so long since I've seen Lyme, but it's
yeah,
unfortunate that because it's just so prevalent in the Northeast. Sorry, I guess
yeah,
where am I now? I was like
yeah.
somewhere
You're
over
like,
here.
where are you?
This way. Brain is churning, getting there. But yeah, it's so common over there. But yeah, out here we just don't have much of that. I mean, I'm fortunate in San Diego where even the cases that we're getting from some of these tick-borne diseases are coming from like Arizona or like a little farther west into California. Like
Yeah.
even the normal population of San Diego doesn't get too bad. It's the ones that are traveling all the time. It's always the dogs that are traveling. That's
Oh, yeah.
the
Well, and this
biggest thing.
dog actually had happened to have been from another country. So
Oh,
they
okay.
were originally probably was where they were infected, like,
Yeah.
originally, and then just had it, and then it detected it 2 years before we saw the dog become clinical. I mean, this dog has been through everything. This dog had, like, just I
Um,
can't I could list you the things that have happened since I knew I've known this dog.
oh,
Like,
poor dog.
weird things, like, I mean, not to go totally outside, but she had a pyometra that I found incidentally. She wasn't even sick.
Hmm, that's weird.
No, that's very weird. It was actually more like a mucometra that was, like, about to become a pyometra. By the time I got to it, I was like,
Just getting
"Any
there.
longer, this would have been a problem." But no, I mean, we were able to schedule her spay. It was very so out of the ordinary, not
Yeah,
normal.
yes, it
Don't
doesn't.
take this as a thing that normally happens. It doesn't.
Yeah,
I
this is
get
not
the
an
weird
encouragement.
things.
Yeah, exactly. You do get the weird things. Honestly,
I
it's
do, I do. Like, the other 2 doctors I work with are like, "Thank God we work with you because we know that if anyone's gonna get the weird thing, it's you, so we never see the weird stuff."
we'll take our ear infections and leave. This is great. So
Exactly, they're like, "Oh, we'll take our easy, like, oh, GI upset, it gets better the next day. Yours ends up
yeah,
being something none of us have ever heard of."
some fungal disease that's not out here very
Yeah,
often. So
exactly, exactly. It's
yep.
like, "Oh, we don't get that here." Except I do.
Actually, and we should talk about fungal diseases at some point. Doesn't have to be today, but
Yes, we should. That is
those
another
are
good one.
that's a big one
But I
because
was
that's
gonna mention, getting back to the tick thing,
yeah,
we just recently, I guess, they've just, like, identified a whole new species of ticks, of, like, an invasive Asian type
that's
of tick.
crazy.
I know, I was reading an article about it, and the thing that's really scary about it more than anything else is that we don't have Rocky Mountain spotted fever here in
Mm,
Indiana, but this particular species of tick carries Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and it's not the Texas Lone Star tick, which is the one that you think of usually as carrying,
yeah,
I believe, if I'm right. It's not, see, I'm not always great with the species because I only know the ones I have to know for where I live.
which is understandable.
Yeah, but Rocky Mountain spotted fever is usually the Lone Star tick, right?
I thought now you got to make me look it up because I'll look it up and put on the podcast
I'm
because
pretty sure. All I know is it's the one that's in Arizona for sure because I did in vet school. I did
those Rabs trips,
the trip. Hmm?
those Rabs trips.
Yeah, we went down there. It
Yeah,
was like with the one with the Humane Society, and
yeah,
we did spay neuter, and we, saw, and this was on a specific Indian reservation where
okay,
they were losing people, babies, elderly people. I mean, like,
that's horrible.
like, horrifying. I mean, so sad. Because people were getting infected with Rocky Mountain spotted fever
Jesus.
because there was no good flea and tick preventative. Um, and so, I mean, and so actually Bayer, um, donated, Seresto collars to the reservation, and it
Yeah,
saved tons of lives, I have to say. And that's where I have now, like, people are, like, saying things about Seresto collars. I'm like, I don't really like tick collars in general, but
yeah,
Seresto collars are the exception to the rule. They actually do work.
yeah. Or at least they do enough of a difference to make them like not spread the diseases quickly. So like
Oh, yeah.
that's and good on Bayer. You know what? Good for you guys.
I
Way to
know.
get back to the community. So
Isn't that amazing? I know,
yeah,
and it made a huge difference, especially because losing, people. I mean, that was family members. I mean, it's just so sad. And then, I mean, yeah, the pets obviously too, but babies and family members is just like too sad to even think about. You know?
yeah. Well, I think that's also important to note why part of our job as veterinarians a lot of time is also pay attention to diseases that are affecting our pets, but can also be zoonotic and affect people as well. A lot of times there's like veterinarians, part of the government, they actually are looking for diseases in pets first because a lot of times they
Mhm.
do become human problems afterwards.
Oh yeah,
And it's been important. That's why we a lot of times will do a lot of these tests because it's helpful to diagnose these things ahead of time. So it's pretty cool, but sometimes kind of scary.
yeah. Well, and it's important to know that if your dog has Lyme disease, you can't get Lyme disease from your dog.
Yes. Thank you
You
for
can
clarifying
only
that.
get them from, yeah. So any of these things, like the Rocky Mountain spotted fever, it has to come from the tick. Now, that being said, if that tick is crawling on your dog, and it has this disease and it doesn't attach to them, but then it attaches to you, yes,
Mhm.
you absolutely can get it from that vector. And that's the issue. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, you're right, Robert. I mean, like our job is not just to protect animal health, but when there was like a big push for the One Health thing, where we work together as a community of healthcare providers with doctors, human, doctors, the one species treating doctors, and
Uh,
I am the daughter of two doctors, and my sister's a doctor, so we always joke around.
oh man, I can't make that joke. I have no family members that are doctors besides.
Well, that's
Yeah.
actually my dad's, like, favorite joke. He's always like,
Is
"What
it?
kind of what kind of veterinarian only treats one species?" A physician or, like, an MD or, he thinks it's so funny, but
Dad jokes are the best.
yeah. But actually, we should do that. We should have my sister come on at some point and talk about zoonotic diseases and stuff because she sees the human side and, she's, actually a primary care doctor that does urgent care, so she's like both of us
Oh
put
nice.
together.
Oh nice. See, let's have a little, three-way on the phone call. She'd be like a
Yeah.
constant, remind us of all human medicine's activities as well. So that'd be kind of cool.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think, but that could be a really helpful thing because there is a lot of crossover and actually even a lot of the preventative stuff that we do, certain vaccines and stuff, we recommend because they are things that you can get from your dog.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
think that's
And there
really
are certain
important.
types of infections you can share with your dogs, things like MRSA and
Mhm.
stuff like that. So
Yeah, lepto. They're no fun, so avoid them. And
right, exactly.
so, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think it shows the importance of testing, paying attention to those things because new diseases do pop up, like in your area, and or not
Hmm.
new diseases, but new carriers for said
Yeah.
disease.
Yeah.
And
But watching those things now, I will say just so that nobody panics if they're in Indiana, they haven't actually found this particular new tick to cause any clinical diseases yet. It's the potential of it to happen, and the more
okay,
that they are around, and I cannot remember the name of the species off the top of my head, but I was reading about it, and at this point now, it's more of a potential concern
okay,
than it is like an actual concern at the time. But all it does is drive home the point that you should have your dog on flea and tick preventative,
mhm,
the most effective one you can afford. And if you're not sure what the options are, talk to your veterinarian. Most of the best ones are prescription, but that doesn't mean you can't get an effective one over the counter, like we were talking about Seresto collars. At the
yeah,
very least, get that on your dog. If they swim, they are not as effective as long as they say they are.
mm,
So that's really important. If you have a dog that's going to swim all summer, it's not going to last 8 months. It's going to be closer to 6. So you need to know that. And just check them every time they come in the house, wipe them down. You mentioned a spray. I have never found one that I know that works, but you mentioned it before and you said it really works.
what I'll say, it's a good add-on
Mhm.
feature. I think because it's like some lavender essential oil. I forget the name of
Yeah.
it, but it's. I think it's a preventative add, but it's not necessarily the primary one I would ever use.
Right.
Like, I wouldn't switch that by itself.
I think I've heard people say like the old school like Skin So Soft just cuz it has that smell,
Hmm.
like a very potent smell to it.
I think
Um
that's part of the reason, 'cause it does smell very strong. Like, when I put it
yeah.
on, like, I know Loki's coming for a good half a mile because he
Yeah.
just smells
Yeah.
like lavender for everywhere, so it's great.
Yeah, but
So,
I've heard that too, that really will help, and lavender is a natural, like, there's plenty of
mm,
flowers and things like that that you can plant that are natural repellents
yeah,
um, to ticks, so mosquitoes more so than ticks, right?
sure. I'm really bad with
I don't
insects.
know, I think that all of them, but either way, the point that's why see, this is why I don't get into that stuff. I just use the
Yeah,
thing that I'm like, I know this works. But you do have to have, like, an all of the above approach, and you really have to be on top of it. You gotta check
yeah.
them, make sure that stuff's off of them.
Yep, I get it. Like, preventative care is the most important part, whether it's medications, watching them, and, uh, couple prayers here and there don't hurt
Yeah,
either, so,
exactly. And to know that a lot of these things are treatable. And so when you notice that your dog is lethargic, if you notice your dog is having some shifting leg lameness, if they're, there's a whole they're kind of vague symptoms, I will say a lot of the times
yeah,
with um with tick-borne disease, but trust your gut. If you think there's something wrong with your dog or if you know that they've had a tick, then go ahead and get them tested and then again 6 months later because it's not going to show up right away.
yeah,
And ultimately, make sure that you're in contact with your veterinarian. Um, if you have any questions, you can always contact us at podcast@mybalto.com and ask us your questions, and we will always talk about them here if we can.
Yep. Excited to get all the questions we can, and as always, it's great talking to you, Sam. Our
Yeah,
weekly catch up. So it's good.
exactly. I know. It's so great. Well, this has been the Pause It Podcast. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll